Valeria Monroe knew her life was a mess the second the tray of pasta, salad, and God help her cranberry juice tipped forward in her hands and cascaded across the crisp white shirt of the man at the head of the long, polished table. The room went silent, horrifyingly silent. She froze, eyes wide, her mouth hanging open in a silent scream as the juice soaked into his shirt and trailed down to his navy slacks. A few of her coworkers gasped. Someone dropped a plastic fork. And then, to make it even worse, the man calmly reached for a linen napkin because of course he had one and dabbed at the mess like this wasn't the most humiliating moment of her entire life. I'm so sorry, she stammered, trying to scoop up the fallen food with trembling hands. I didn't mean, it's all right. His voice was deep, smooth, controlled. Valeria blinked, and that's when she recognized him, not from accounting, not from HR, not even from legal. Brendan Prescott, the CEO, her boss's boss's boss. The man who owned the entire Prescott and Hale Corporation. The man whose face was on Forbes last year. The billionaire who built a tech empire before he turned 35, and she just dumped cranberry juice all over his chest. Miss? He asked, still watching her. His eyes were sharp but not unkind. Monroe, she whispered, still crouching on the floor like a raccoon caught in headlights. Valeria Monroe, I work in product development. He offered her his hand. She stared at it like it would bite her, then quickly grabbed a napkin instead and tried to blot his shirt again. I'm so, Valeria, he said, gently taking the napkin from her and standing. It's fine. I've survived worse. The room continued to gawk, but Brendan turned to the rest of the table and said, please carry on, like she hadn't just made a total fool of herself in front of the most powerful man in the building. He turned back to her. Come with me, she blinked. What? I need to change, he said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And you owe me an apology. Lunch. Her mouth fell open. You want me to go with you to lunch, he said with a one-sided shrug. It's the least you can do after attacking me with cranberry juice. Her face burned. I didn't attack you. I tripped on someone's stupid laptop bag. He tilted his head. So you admit it was an ambush? She stared at him. Was he joking? I'll have your assistant schedule something, she mumbled, already backing away. I should go. I need to clean this. No need, he said, already walking toward the exit. You're coming with me now. She looked around frantically, but no one stopped her. Her boss, Greg, looked like he wanted to melt into the floor, but Brendan didn't even glance back. She had no choice. Still stunned, she followed him out of the conference room, across the lobby, and into a waiting black car with tinted windows. Is this legal? She muttered once the door shut behind her. Brendan chuckled. Relax, I'm not kidnapping you. I just happen to believe in consequences. And lunch is your punishment of choice. He glanced over at her, amused. Lunch is my way of making sure you don't bolt out of the building and never come back. She folded her arms. That was my plan, I figured. 10 minutes later, they pulled up to a private elevator inside a sleek glass building overlooking the river. She followed him up, still not entirely convinced she wasn't dreaming. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a luxury penthouse that smelled faintly of cedar wood and espresso. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art, marble countertops, a grand piano in the corner. Where are we? She asked, spinning around slowly. My place, Brendan said, shrugging off his jacket. I need to change. Her eyes widened. Wait, your actual place? He disappeared down the hall. What in the actual hell was happening? 1 minute she was balancing a plastic tray in the company cafeteria, and the next she was standing barefoot on a heated marble floor in a billionaire CEO's penthouse. When he came back, he was in a fresh black dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, collar open. He looked unfairly attractive and calm. Like this was just a Tuesday. He handed her a glass of water. You look like you're going to pass out, he said. I might. He smirked. No, smiled, definitely smiled. It was subtle, but it was the first time she saw something shift behind his eyes, something softer. I'm not going to fire you, Valeria, she blinked. You remember my name? I make it a point to remember names, especially ones that come with food-related injuries. She laughed, then immediately covered her mouth. Sorry. That was rude. No, that was nice, he said, walking toward the kitchen. You laugh like you mean it. She didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever said something like that to her. Especially not a billionaire who looked like he stepped out of a GQ cover shoot. He opened a hidden fridge, pulled out 2 plates of something that looked far too elegant to be homemade and placed them on the counter. Sue's chef prepped it earlier, he said. Figured I'd need fuel after back-to-back meetings. You're lucky you caught me on a good day. She hesitated. You're kind of not what I expected, he raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? I don't know, cold, distant, screaming about my incompetence, definitely not lunch in your penthouse. He leaned against the counter watching her. You don't know me, Valeria? No, I don't, she paused. Why are you doing this? He smiled again. Because you're real, she frowned. Real, you didn't pretend to be someone else. You didn't bow or panic or try to flatter me. You dumped cranberry juice on me and tried to clean it with a napkin like a maniac. She flushed. Thanks, it's refreshing. They ate in silence for a minute, then she said, Are you always this strange? He laughed, a low, genuine sound. Only when I'm interested. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. He didn't look away, and suddenly the tray, the juice, the embarrassment. It didn't matter. Because Brendan Prescott, billionaire CEO and the most powerful man she'd ever met, was watching her like she was the most fascinating thing in the room. And Valeria had no idea what she'd just gotten herself into. Valeria stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, her heels sinking slightly into the soft wooden planks beneath her. The view stretched out endlessly, sunlight glinting off the river, the city skyline gleaming with gold and steel. She hadn't meant to stay this long. After lunch, she'd expected him to usher her out with some polite excuse. Instead, he'd invited her upstairs to see the view that keeps him sane. Now she was here, surrounded by potted olive trees and sculpted hedges, feeling like she'd accidentally fallen into someone else's life. You don't talk much, Brendan said behind her, his voice quiet but close enough to make her stomach knot. I talk plenty, she said without turning. Just not when I'm trying to figure out if this is actual reality or a very elaborate HR sting operation. He laughed under his breath. If it was, I'd have to fire myself. She turned to face him. Why did you really bring me here? He walked past her and leaned against the railing. Because I wanted to. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. She crossed her arms. You have a reputation. People talk about you like you're some kind of storm, unpredictable, impressive, dangerous if handled poorly. Do I? He asked, looking at her now with a different intensity. And what do you think? I think you're used to getting what you want. And you think that's a flaw, I think it's a warning. They held each other's gaze for a long beat. Then he said, I didn't expect you to challenge me. I didn't expect you to notice me. He pushed off the railing and walked toward her. I notice everything, Valeria, especially the things no one else bothers to look at. Her pulse stuttered when he stopped just short of touching her. Why me? He considered her, his expression unreadable. Do you always need a reason to be seen? She turned away, unsettled. You don't know anything about me. Then tell me something. She hesitated, then said, I wasn't supposed to be in that meeting. I was just dropping off the revised product samples. I wasn't even on the invite list. Then it's a good thing you were. You call getting food dumped on you a good thing. I call being reminded that not everything in my world is calculated and sterile a good thing. She studied him. You really hate it, don't you, the way everyone treats you like you're untouchable? He didn't answer right away. I used to think I wanted reverence, now I'm not sure what I want. You built all this, she said, gesturing to the skyline, and you're still not sure it's easy to build walls. Harder to admit they've trapped you. She watched him for a moment, the way his jaw tightened like he'd said too much. Then she asked, Do you always bring strangers into your private space when you're feeling philosophical? I don't bring anyone here, she blinked. Then why me? He stepped closer. Because you looked me in the eye after spilling an entire lunch on me. You called the situation stupid instead of groveling. You didn't try to impress me, and that makes you the most interesting person I've met in months." Her throat tightened. "You don't even know what I do. You work in product development. You graduated from Columbia with a focus on industrial design. You proposed a modular packaging system that cut costs by 30% last quarter. And you wear headphones when you're thinking hard, which is why you didn't hear me walk past your desk last week." Her mouth parted. "You notice that?" "I notice everything." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed on the table by the Sun loungers. He didn't move to check it. She picked at the hem of her sleeve. "This is too much. I need to go," he nodded slowly. "I won't stop you," she turned, but his voice stopped her. "Come to the charity gala Friday night," she turned back. "Gala, it's at the Langford Hotel, black tie." "You'll get an invite on your desk tomorrow," her brow furrowed. "Why would you want me there?" "Because I want to see how you handle a room full of sharks. And if I say no, I'll find another excuse to see you." She shook her head slowly. "You don't strike me as the kind of man who takes no for an answer." "I'm not, but I'm also not stupid enough to push you." Her heart pounded. "And what happens if I do come?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "Then I'll show you what it's like to have someone see you." "Really see you?" She didn't have a response to that, not one she'd be willing to say aloud, so she turned and walked toward the elevator, her steps quick, her thoughts chaotic. She didn't look back, but the way her skin tingled told her he was still watching. And that terrified her more than anything. Because Brendan Prescott wasn't a man you could walk away from without consequence. She had a feeling saying yes to that gala would change everything. And worse, she wasn't sure she'd say no. The Langford Hotel shimmered under the city lights like a palace carved from glass and gold. Valeria stood just inside the grand entrance, her breath catching as the doorman nodded and ushered her into a world that felt galaxies away from the one she usually inhabited. A string quartet played under a canopy of chandeliers, and waiters glided through the crowd with silver trays that held crystal flutes of champagne and hors d'oeuvres she couldn't identify. She wore the gown delivered to her apartment hours before. No note enclosed, just a card bearing the Prescott and Hale crest, and her name etched in silver foil. She hadn't planned on accepting the invitation, but when the dress arrived, midnight blue silk with a low back and a neckline that made her doubt her own courage, she'd taken it as a challenge. One she couldn't ignore. She spotted Brendan before he saw her. Standing near the balcony doors, he wore a tailored black tuxedo, the sharp lines of his profile illuminated by the golden glow of the ballroom. He was speaking with an older man in a plum velvet dinner jacket, but his posture shifted slightly, as if sensing her presence. When he turned, the reaction was immediate. He excused himself mid-sentence and crossed the floor with quiet purpose, eyes locked on her like she was the only person in the room. She fought the urge to fidget under his gaze. "You came," he said once he reached her, his voice low and steady. "You sent a dress to my apartment," she replied, "and you wore it. I didn't say I'd stay long. I didn't ask you to." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unspoken. Then he offered his arm. "Will you walk with me?" She hesitated, then took it. They moved through the crowd, past hedge fund, royalty, and television personalities, until they reached the far end of the ballroom where a private terrace overlooked the city. The air was crisp, the sky clear. He leaned one hand on the ornate railing. "You grew up in Oregon, didn't you?" Her head turned sharply. "How did you know that?" "I read your file, not because I had to, because I wanted to." She didn't know how to respond to that. "Then you probably know I don't belong at events like this." "You belong exactly where you choose to stand." He paused. "Your father was a mechanic." Her breath stalled. "You really did read everything?" "I wanted to understand what shaped you." She turned to face him. "And what does that tell you?" "That resilience doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears worn-out sneakers and refuses to give up." She didn't realize she'd gripped the railing until her knuckles turned pale. "You're not what I expected either." He looked at her. What did you expect tonight, honestly, to be ignored, or used to make someone else jealous or paraded like a novelty? His forehead creased. That's not who I am. Maybe not, but men like you don't end up with women like me. He stepped closer. Why not? Because we don't speak the same language. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she felt the heat of his body through the silk of her gown. Then teach me yours. The words rattled her. You don't get to say things like that. Why not? Because I don't know what's real with you. He took a breath, like he was weighing something. I've been surrounded by people who play roles for so long, I forgot what it feels like to be disarmed by honesty. She looked at him. Are you honest with me, brutally? Then tell me what you want. His eyes darkened, not with desire, but with something quieter, more dangerous. I want the woman who looked me in the eye and dared me not to underestimate her. She stepped back, overwhelmed. That's not a want. That's a fascination. No, he said, voice firm. Fascination fades. This isn't fading. Before she could answer, a tall woman in a silver gown approached. Her heels clicked like punctuation marks against the stone. Brendan, she said smoothly, her voice practiced and familiar. You weren't at the board dinner last night. He didn't look away from Valeria. I had other plans. The woman's eyes flicked to Valeria, assessing her in a glance. And you must be his latest project. Valeria's chest tightened. She didn't flinch, but she felt the insult settle like ice behind her ribs. Brendan's voice sharpened. She's not a project. She's the only reason I'm still here tonight. The woman arched a brow. Well, you've certainly changed. I've stopped pretending, he said simply. The woman gave a tight smile, nodded, and walked away. Valeria was still staring at the spot where she'd stood. She's your ex, she said flatly. He didn't deny it. She's not important. She clearly thinks she is. People cling to relevance when it's slipping. Valeria looked at him hard. I need to know this isn't a game. If it were, I'd have played by now. She turned toward the city lights, her mind a war of doubts and instincts. This doesn't make sense. He stepped beside her again. It doesn't have to, it just has to be real. She closed her eyes. He didn't touch her. He didn't beg, he waited. And somehow that was worse. Because it meant he already knew she wasn't running. Not yet. Valeria stood outside the revolving doors of Prescott and Hale, the early morning sun catching the edge of the glass like a spotlight. Her heels clicked briskly on the pavement as she crossed the lobby, nodding a polite greeting to the receptionist who blinked at her with wide eyes, as if seeing her in a new light. She was early. On purpose. She needed clarity before the day devoured her. Brendan had barely spoken to her after the gala's terrace. Not because he ignored her, but because he hadn't needed to say anything. The weight of what passed between them lingered like electricity in the air. Still, she had questions, and she wasn't the type to let them fester. She stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the executive floor, and braced herself. When the doors opened, his assistant looked up in surprise. He's in, the woman said cautiously. But he's not. I won't be long, Valeria said, already walking. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. His door was slightly ajar, and when she pushed it open, Brendan was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, jacket off. Cuffs rolled to his elbows, the skyline behind him a mosaic of steel and sunlight. You don't waste time, he said without turning. I didn't come for small talk. Then good, he said, finally turning to face her. Neither did I. She stepped inside, letting the door fall shut behind her. I need to know what happens next. He leaned back against the edge of his desk. You tell me. I'm not going to be your secret. You were never going to be. There's already talk, she said, voice low but steady. People saw us at the gala. They're making assumptions. They always do. I don't care about rumors, she said, crossing her arms. But I care about integrity. You're my boss. I can't pretend there aren't complications. His gaze didn't waver. Then stop pretending. Say what you want. I want the truth, she said, not charm, not gestures. The truth. He walked toward her slowly, his expression stripped of every practiced mask. I haven't let anyone close in a long time, and I didn't expect you. But I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel something shift the second you looked at me like I wasn't invincible. She exhaled, her tension fracturing. That's not an answer. I want you, he said, no hesitation, not for a night, not as a distraction. I want whatever version of this you're willing to give me, she stared at him. And what about the company? I've already spoken to the board, her eyes widened. You what? I stepped down as your direct supervisor, effective yesterday. She shook her head slowly. You didn't have to do that. I did, he said. Because if I didn't, I'd always wonder if it was me pulling the strings, and I need this to be real. She took a step forward. You're serious, he nodded. I've spent years building things that looked impressive from the outside but were hollow inside. I'm done with that. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Then stop treating me like I'm a question you're waiting to answer, he squeezed gently. Are you saying you're in? I'm saying I'm done pretending I'm not. A knock startled them both. Brendan called for whoever it was to enter and his assistant peeked in. Sorry to interrupt, she said, eyes flicking discreetly toward Valeria, but the car for your meeting in D.C. is downstairs, he glanced at Valeria. Come with me, she blinked. What? Come to D.C.? I have work. You'll be back tomorrow. We'll be on the jet in 40 minutes. There's a spare suit jacket in the car if you need to pretend we're not arriving together. She laughed softly. You really don't do halfway, do you? I don't want to show up to another room full of people who think they know me without having the one person who actually does at my side. Her voice dropped. That's not fair. He stepped closer. No, it's honest. The drive to the private terminal was quiet but not uncomfortable. When they boarded the jet, she felt the shift, not just in air pressure or altitude, but in him. The way he leaned toward her when he spoke. The way he asked her opinion on the pitch he'd be giving. The way he didn't correct her when she disagreed with part of the strategy. You're not afraid I'll make you look bad, she teased as they reviewed the deck. I'm afraid you'll make me look lazy, he said. Your edit on slide 6 was better than anything my team gave me, she raised a brow. You're not just flattering me. I have enough money, he said. I don't need to lie to get what I want. The meeting went better than she expected. He introduced her not as a subordinate, but as a collaborator. The executives in the room listened when she spoke. By the time they left, she felt less like a tag-along and more like a partner. That night, they didn't go back to the penthouse. They went to a quiet inn outside the city, tucked between vineyards and open sky. He booked 2 rooms without asking, and she respected him more for it. But she knocked on his door anyway. When he opened it, she didn't speak. She just stepped inside, and he caught her face in his hands like he'd been waiting a lifetime. Later, as they lay tangled in sheets and silence, she turned to him and said, You're not what I expected. He brushed a knuckle along her jaw. Then we're even, she smiled, eyes heavy with peace. What happens now? We keep building, he said. Not just companies, not just plans. Us? Months passed like chapters, each one better than the last. She transferred to a new department, one where no one questioned her presence or her promotion. He stopped hiding when she came to meetings. They were a team, not just in whispers, but in truth. And when, on a rooftop overlooking the city where it all began, he knelt before her with a ring made of platinum and a diamond shaped like a tear of light, she didn't hesitate. Yes, she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. 1,000 times yes. He rose, wrapping her in his arms, the skyline blazing behind them, no tray, no chaos. Just 2 people who stopped pretending and finally let themselves fall, not by accident, but by choice. Valeria tugged gently at the sash of her robe, stepping barefoot across the sun-warmed stone of the villa terrace. The scent of oranges drifted through the morning air, mingling with the faint trace of salt carried in from the sea beyond the cliffs. Somewhere below, waves played against the rocks with a calm persistence that echoed the quiet steadiness she'd begun to feel in her chest. Brendan stood a few feet away, phone to his ear, bare feet planted in the dewy grass, shirt unbuttoned at the collar. His voice was low, clipped, professional, but as soon as he saw her, something softened in his expression. He ended the call quickly and turned to her. They confirmed the deal, he said. The acquisition is going through. She reached for his hand automatically. You're really letting go of the biotech division? I am, he said, linking their fingers. It's the right move. It hasn't aligned with my vision for a long time. You built it, she said quietly. I built a lot of things I thought I needed, he said. Turns out what I needed was space to breathe, and someone who sees through everything. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. You've spent years chasing what you thought mattered. And now I'm chasing something else. They stood there for a long moment as the wind stirred the olive trees lining the path to the guest cottages. Behind them, the villa's white stone walls glowed gently under the rising sun. I've been thinking about something, Valeria said, lifting her head to meet his gaze. Something we never really talked about. His brows lifted, but he didn't interrupt. I want to design again, she said. Not for the company, not for someone else's brand, for me. I want to build something that's mine. He hesitated only a beat before nodding, then do it. I don't know if I'll succeed. I don't care if you fail, he said. I care that you try. She blinked, surprised by how deeply those words hit her. You mean that? I'd invest right now if you let me. You've already given me too much. Then let me give you this, he said. Not as a partner in business, as someone who believes in you more than anyone else ever has. She exhaled and something inside her settled. Then I'll start, he kissed her temple. When we get home. I don't want to go home yet. Then we won't. The door behind them opened and his housekeeper appeared with 2 mugs of coffee. She gave Valeria a warm smile before retreating. Valeria took her cup and sank into one of the cushioned chairs near the terrace wall. Your mother called last night, Brendan said, sitting beside her. Valeria blinked. Really? She left a message. Said she wanted to apologize for not making it to the gala. She hasn't been to the city in over a year. She said she saw the article in Vogue, he added. The one with your photo next to mine. Valeria smiled slowly. And she said, and I quote, you look like you finally found someone who doesn't make you dim your light. Her eyes stung suddenly, unreasonably. She said that, she did. She set the coffee down and leaned into him. I love you, she said softly. He turned to her, eyes steady. I know. She pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. That's it, no grand gesture, no fireworks. I bought the villa next door, he said casually. She stared. You what? I figured if we ever wanted to expand or start thinking about future plans, we could use the space. You mean a family? She asked, her voice thin with surprise. He nodded. Only if that's what you want. She was quiet for a moment. I never thought I'd want that, not really. And now she reached for his hand again. Now I want everything. He leaned in and kissed her, slow and certain, like it was the most natural thing they'd ever done. Several months later, guests gathered beneath a canopy of lanterns strung between ancient cypress trees. The night air filled with the scent of jasmine and the sound of a string quartet playing in the orchard. Valeria stood beneath the archway in a gown of ivory silk, her hair pinned with gold leaves, her eyes locked on Brendan's as he took her hands in his. The ceremony was short, intimate. Every word spoken between them was real, witnessed by only the people who mattered. When they were pronounced husband and wife, he kissed her like the moment had waited years to arrive. Applause echoed between the trees, but all she heard was his breath against her skin, his hand warm on the small of her back. Later that night, as guests danced beneath the stars and firelight flickered across the stone walls, they slipped away to the quiet vineyard behind the villa. I have something for you, Brendan said, reaching into his jacket pocket. She tilted her head. Another wedding gift, not exactly. He handed her a small, worn notebook. Her breath caught. My sketches, she whispered, running her fingers over the cover. Where did you find this? You left it in the office the day you were promoted. Brendan. I've seen every page, he said. It's what made me believe in you. The designs, the rawness, you weren't afraid of how rough it looked. You just kept creating. Tears filled her eyes. I thought I lost it. You didn't. You just needed someone to remind you it mattered. She kissed him again, her heart full to the brim. And when they returned to the celebration, hand in hand, laughter and music spilling across the hills, Valeria felt something she hadn't known how to name before. It wasn't just love. It was home. Together, they built a life filled with art and intention. Her design studio launched within the year, her first line selling out in under a week. He stepped back from his empire, choosing projects that stirred his passion, not just his ambition. They traveled. They created. They dreamed, and through it all, they chose each other. Every single day.